guys, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mangs, and I welcome you guys to another Fire Emblem Three Houses character spotlights. And well, the time has finally come. I can't run away from it any longer. We just simply have to cover that character. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This might just be one of the most polarizing spotlights I've put out, because I know half of you guys are going to love it, and the other half are probably going to hate it. So let's fire up the waifu debate and shine the spotlight on the meek, paranoid, but arguably somewhat adorable Bernadetta. Bernadetta von Varley is the eldest daughter and heir to the Count of Varley, a region located south of Garreg Mach, close to the Ogma Mountains. Varley is a dry and arid region that uses the minerals from the mountains to construct weapons and armor, and is also responsible for maintaining the relationship between the Empire and the Church of Syros. Growing up, Bernadetta was put through a lot of abuse from her incredibly strict father, who wanted to train her to become the perfect example of an obedient wife. He did this to make her more suitable for a political marriage, and his harsh lessons included things like tying her to a chair for hours on end. This abuse led to Bernadetta completely isolating herself from the outside world by locking herself in her room, and any attempts to have her removed would lead to her kicking and screaming like a wild animal. This extreme isolation made it very hard for Bernadetta to socialize with others, but there were a few occasions where she came into contact with other children around her age. One such time was when she happened to meet a commoner boy, and despite her paranoia and shyness, she was able to form a friendship with him. However, when Bernadetta's abusive father found out that she was mingling with a lowborn, he forbade her to continue seeing him. Shortly after, Bernadetta found out that the boy had been brutally beaten, most likely by her own father's men. This further traumatized her and caused Bernadetta to isolate herself even more, as she now feared that anyone she came into contact with would be hurt as a result. There was one person in Bernadetta's early life who treated her with a little bit of kindness, and that was her uncle. He was warm and caring, and Bernadetta found herself able to relax in his presence. Sadly, he passed away at some point and was buried at the Garreg Mach monastery, and Bernadetta was very saddened by his loss. But she remembered the time she spent with him fondly, and these memories gave her some much-needed hope in her darkest hours. While Bernadetta's life consisted of a lot of sadness, isolation, loneliness, and trauma, she found some solace within the confines of her own quarters, where she took to activities like sewing, knitting, writing, and painting. She also took a great liking to plants, particularly carnivorous ones, as she admired their ability to stay still in one place and wait for their meals to come to them. While Bernadetta had far from a happy childhood, she did genuinely enjoy her own company most of the time, and only really felt fear and anxiety when other people tried pushing her out of her comfort zone. One night, Bernadetta was forcefully dragged out of her room, put inside a box, and transported against her will to the Garreg Mach monastery in order to be enrolled at the Officers' Academy. Why her parents went out of their way to have her forcefully transferred in such a convoluted way is anyone's guess, but it could be speculated that they viewed Bernadetta as simply unmarriable, and so they had her enrolled in the academy either to get rid of her, or to try and turn her into a somewhat functioning human being. While Bernadetta was frightened at the prospect of having to spend time with other students, she was at the very least given her own room, which was enough to get her through the days there. She ended up becoming part of the Black Eagles class during the Imperial Year of 180, at the age of 17. Paranoid and hysterical, Bernadetta shows clear signs of someone who has undergone terrible trauma during their upbringing. Her anxiety is so crippling that she has difficulties doing things that most people would take for granted, such as holding a regular conversation or merely leaving her own room. In many conversations with other people at the monastery, Bernadetta will immediately assume the worst heading into a talk, thinking she's in trouble or that the person means to do her physical harm. More often than not, something as simple as approaching her can lead to her having a hysterical panic attack, where she acts like the world is going to end. While this is sometimes shown in a humorous light, such as in her supports with Hubert, which are meant to be comical, most of them are just tragic because they show how badly Bernadetta was broken by her abusive father. Despite her crippling anxiety, Bernadetta does occasionally make attempts to come out of her shell, but tends to do so in very clumsy ways, as she isn't very good at socializing. She greatly admires Edelgard, but instead of merely trying to start up a conversation with her, she follows her around in the monastery from a distance, which eventually leads Edelgard into confronting her, and despite showing willingness to get to know each other better, Bernadetta simply freaks out and refuses to listen, believing that Edelgard is intent on punishing her. We see much of the same behavior manifest itself in her C support with Dorothea, where Bernadetta badly wishes she could become friends with the talented and popular songstress, only to once again freak out when Dorothea actually approaches her. In fact, freaking out is probably the thing Bernadetta spends the most time doing, which can leave a pretty bad first impression on people. Once Bernadetta does start warming up to people though, we see a side of her that would most likely be a lot more prevalent had she not undergone the terrible abuse she suffered as a child. At her core, behind all the hysteria, Bernadetta is merely a classic introvert that enjoys her own company. But sadly her paranoia tends to overshadow that side of her, which is why it can be very beautiful to see it when it finally surfaces. We see this clearly displayed in her support conversations with Alois, as he reminds Bernadetta of her deceased uncle, making her able to relax enough to have a calming conversation with him, and we can finally see how she can truly be when she's around someone that makes her comfortable. Bernadetta improves greatly over the 5-year time skip. Not only does this show in her appearance being a lot more tidy, with her hair being straighter and less unkempt, but her post-time skip exclusive supports also show her being visibly more confident and outgoing. Though she still struggles with fits of hysteria, they are much less frequent and don't last as long, meaning that the years spent at the academy really has helped her grow. I want to finish this segment by highlighting the controversy around the recent censorship of Bernadetta's support with Byleth, as I know a lot of people are going to point it out in the comments. In the recent content patch, which gave us the new maddening difficulty, as well as the horrendous volleyball outfits, Bernadetta's B support with Byleth was changed to appear a lot less dark. Instead of saying that her father tied her to a chair and forced her to become quiet in order to turn her into a submissive wife, she now instead says that her father only tied her to a chair. Many have speculated why this change was put in, and it is most likely done because the original support was a little too dark. Also, it can be speculated that the word submissive has some negative connotations with it that Nintendo just doesn't want to deal with. However, some people say that this new dialogue is in fact more faithful to the original Japanese scripts, so it could also be that they were a little unhappy with the initial translation and thus decided to make this change to make it more accurate. It's difficult to say though, as they never really released an official statement explaining why they did it, so I'll leave this to the comment section. Why do you guys think they changed this line? And do you agree with making changes to a support post-release via DLC? Let me hear your opinions on this in the comments below. According to a survey done by the Nintendo Dream magazine, Bernadetta is the 5th most popular character in Tree Houses by players who have completed the game. If you enter Bernadetta's room while exploring the monastery, you can discover that it contains unique items such as rolls of fabric and a teddy bear, representing that she spends more time there than the other students. Bernadetta has her own unique post-time skip model as an archer and sniper. Bernadetta's birthday is on December 12, or the 12th day of the ethereal moon in the Fodlan calendar. Bernadetta's English voice actor, Erica Mendes, also voices Liana in Fire Emblem Warriors, as well as Deirdre in Heroes. Bernadetta starts out as a commoner and will join you at the start of the game if you pick the Black Eagle's house, but if you don't, you can still recruit her by getting at least 20 strength and C rank in bows. Or as always, just build up a B support with her and she'll eventually seek you out on her own. True to her frail and worried nature, Bernadetta is a unit that focuses on dexterity and speed and not a lot of anything else. Her 35% base strength growth is a little on the low side, but it should be good enough for her to become a decent physical unit as long as you pick a class that supplement this growth a little. Bernadetta starts out with E rank in most weapon types, but has an E+ in lances and a D rank in bows, which gives her the curved shot combat art right from the start. Bernadetta is also proficient in lances and bows, but weak in swords, axes and heavy armor. She possesses a budding talent in riding as well, which will unlock the pass skill if tutored. Bernadetta's personal skill is Persecution Complex. This skill makes her deal 5 extra damage in combat as long as she is not on full health. This skill is ridiculously strong, but only if you have the mindset to keep it active. There are so many ways you could go about proccing this skill. The easiest being to just let Bernadetta take a hit in combat, but you can also utilize damage dealing terrain such as fire, or take advantage of a level up where she gains hit points. Since Bernadetta's strength can be a little low, she really does need this personal skill to fight at her full potential. So just ensure you constantly keep it in mind and definitely resist the temptation to heal her up, and it might just be one of the best ones in the game. It is best taken advantage of if Bernadetta is of a ranged class like an archer, where she can attack enemies while injured without risking counterattacks. Bernadetta's special budding talent skill is Pass, which lets her move through squares occupied by enemy units, and you obtain this skill by tutoring her in horseback riding. This is a skill that is a little bit difficult to rate. If you prefer to keep Bernadetta in the back of your army, it won't really see much use, but if you have a very aggressive playstyle and don't mind her rushing through enemy ranks to pick off juicier targets in the back, or doing some crazy rescue strats where you use Bernadetta to pass through a bunch of enemies and warp your own units behind their lines, it could be pretty good. Regardless of what you think of this skill, opening up more paths of movement is never a bad thing, especially if you play as a mobile class. So it is definitely recommended you keep this skill on her, as you might suddenly find yourself in a situation where it becomes highly useful. Bernadetta comes with a minor crest of Indec, and I do apologize if I mispronounced that. This crest has a 10% chance to let her attack twice, similar to the Adept skill from the previous games. While this crest's proc rates is very rare and won't ever rise in its activation rate as Bernie gains levels, it is considered one of the best crest effects in the game, as an extra attack is just so incredibly valuable, especially when Bernadetta's personal skill adds an additional 5 extra damage per attack, so they synergize really well together. Keep in mind that this crest cannot proc during combat arts, but it can proc when she wields spray weapons. While Bernadetta is not a great spellcaster due to her personal 20% magic growth, she does actually have some decent spells available to her. In recent magic, she obtains Blizzard at D rank, Thunder at D+, Thoron at C rank, and Fimbulvetter at A rank. In Faith magic, she gains Heal at D rank, Nosferatu at D+, Physic at C rank, and Rescue at A rank. If you are really big on movements, you can opt to have Bernadetta go through the Cavalier and Paladin classes on her way to Bow Knights, which also slightly helps out her low strength growth. But the speed penalty this game inflicts on mounted units will turn Bernadetta into a far weaker combat units, and the +1 bow range she gains from Archer and Sniper is also something you can't take advantage of on horseback, even if she still can use her bow. Doing this with any success depends on how strong your Bernie is. If she snowballs ridiculously out of control early on, the mount will serve her really well, but if the penalty pushes her back on the threshold of not being able to double, it will simply not be worth it, and you're better off taking advantage of the Archer/Sniper path. Something that is also sort of worth mentioning is that Paladin's immunities to damaging terrain means you can't use fire to inflict damage on her and proc her personal skill. If you decide to eventually turn Bernadetta into a Bow Knights, you might actually be a little shocked to find that the promotion might feel more like a demotion in terms of her fighting power. While the extra mobility granted from the Bow Knight class and its Move Again ability is certainly great on paper, the mounted penalties to speed and strength might put her back a little bit too much, especially considering by the time she usually gets to the stage, the enemies will be rapidly scaling up in terms of their attack speed and overall durability as you're entering the late game, especially on higher difficulties. I know that when I finally got my Bernadetta into a Bow Knights, I was sort of saddened to see that she hardly left a dent in enemies anymore. This experience may vary from player to player, and can sort of be lessened by having her go through the Brigand class line for the Deathblow skill, or simply forging her a really strong weapon such as a Brave Bow Plus. It's not like it's the end of the world, just something that you should be a little wary of. While her base magic growth is sorta low, Bernadetta can actually be a pretty effective healer as a bishop due to having access to Physic and Rescue. And since bishop gets +10 bonus healing from their class skill anyway, her low magic won't hurt her as much as you might think. She can also pull off some great strategies with the aforementioned Pass and Rescue combo, though keep in mind that her rescue range will be very low. It also needs to be pointed out that the Brawler and Grappler classes being gender locked to males is a huge wasted opportunity for Bernadetta. While she doesn't have any proficiencies in brawling to speak of, her personal skill, which grants +5 damage per attack when injured, combined with her crest, which also synergizes greatly with ray weapons, combined with her high speed stat, which would most likely allow her to quadruple enemies naturally, Bernadetta would most likely have been one of the best brawlers in the game. But alas, Treehouses felt the need to put weird gender-locked restrictions on the class system in an otherwise free, sandboxy game. Maybe future DLC will remedy this? We can only hope. Just take care of this poor girl and don't make her too paranoid, and she will hopefully serve you quite well. Bernadetta is one of those characters who's just an extremely polarizing figure in the Fire Emblem community. People either absolutely love her, or they downright despise her. She's clearly a character made to resonate to those suffering from anxiety, but I can imagine that even among those people, there might be some who find the game's comedic portrayal of her issues a tad insensitive. Like they are using her paranoia, a pretty serious mental condition, to make you laugh at just how silly she is. While I'm sure there are a lot of people who find Bernadetta extremely relatable, I can also imagine that a lot of those people just simply find her really annoying. Personally, I find Bernadetta to be a very difficult character to enjoy. So many of her supports are just so incredibly jarring, even if they do get a little bit better once you get across the initial hurdle of her constantly freaking out. I also think the fact that Treehouse is putting no restrictions on the amount of supports you can unlock in a single playthrough is actually a detriment to Bernadetta's character, as it forces you to literally sit through each and every one of her C supports in a very short span of time, which I think for some people can just be a bit too much. I think that in one of the Game Boy Advance style games, where she would be limited to around 5 supports per playthrough, her character wouldn't have time to get as annoying in the supports, and this might have actually worked in her favor. Still, Bernadetta is a ridiculously popular character, and I do understand her appeal. She's just not a character that I personally like a lot, so I'll rate her 3 out of 5 stars. While Bernadetta's design is neither attractive nor appealing to me directly, I must admit that I find it kinda cool how they based her attire off the generic female archer from Fire Emblem Heroes, and how well it actually suits her. They clearly tried going for a look that would captivate the people who like to protect and preserve, and I would say they really pulled this off with Bernadetta. I mean, look at the comment section of this video later and count all the best waifu or must protect so precious comments, and just, see how many of them there are. In terms of her design though, I definitely think her post-timeskip appearance is where she truly shines, as you can clearly see a visible growth in not only the way she carries herself, but just in the general aura that she gives off. And it's also very cute to see little details such as the fact that Bernadetta takes more care of her hair post-timeskip, showing she's coming out of her shell and being a bit more aware of her surroundings, and that's always great to see, so I'll give her 4 out of 5 stars in this area. Bernadetta's personality isn't the only thing that divides the Fire Emblem fandom. Even as a unit, she can be very polarizing. I see so many comments from people who have attempted to use her, with some claiming she's the best character in the entirety of the Black Eagles, while others claim she is complete and utter trash. I think this is because Bernadetta has a major flaw in that she's a physical-based character that is sort of fast, but also has a very low strength growth. This means that for some, she can either become a super fast, super strong unit that can easily one-run enemies, or for others, she simply just becomes a very weak unit that maybe hits twice but does no damage. While I wouldn't call her bad by any means, I honestly think she lands somewhere in the middle of the Black Eagle students, so I'll give her a 3 out of 5 stars in this area. I'd like to finish this spotlight by thanking my amazing Patreon supporters. Your support means a lot to me and is the reason I can do this every day without having to rely on YouTube's instability. There are many tiers you can join with various rewards, and by becoming a silver tier Patreon, you can even request your very own character spotlight. Check the link in the video description or at the end of this video for more information. If you have issues with Patreon for whatever reason, you can support my channel directly by clicking the join button in the lower right corner of the video. This grants you a cool icon next to your name, as well as access to unique emotes. Regardless of what happens though, all my content will always remain 100% free, and supporting me is completely optional, but very appreciated. Anyway guys, if you want to see more spotlights, click on the playlist linked in front of you, or check out the previous spotlight I've done. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, you are a true fan. Until next time, my name is Mangs, goodbye.